Gardens. While I can tell you a lot about Ethan, I know my accounts would be incomplete if I only shared my own experiences. Because the truth is that I have not walked to each corner of the world myself, but there are some who have. In the same way that I am not a great king, artisan, explorer, or philosopher, but there are some who are. In my garden there is a sculpture, but it is not a sculpture garden. I grow beans and tomatoes, lettuce and pumpkins, but it is not a farm. Nor is a farm simply a large garden. I grow flowers and ivy, and I have a rosemary bush where often large wolf spiders make their nests. But the stone toad stands guard in front of the tiny house of stripped white oak bark and shale. Don't get too excited, the house is vacant at the moment. It was built by a gnome and cropped up literally overnight one day in late autumn. I noticed it when I saw a plume of smoke billowing, and I ran out in a panic with a pail of water, only to find a gnome holding his hands out, assuring me he merely used some damp kindling by accident. After a short exchange, he told me he would be gone at or around the spring equinox, and I would scarcely notice him. I understood and agreed, secretly excited. I offered him my roof, but seeing that he'd already raised one and gone through the trouble to collect firewood and arrange furniture, he declined, stating that he was a private individual. I was somewhat relieved, as I was beginning to worry about how to cook to accommodate a gnome. The next day I gifted him 2 old glass bottles, which he used to fashion windows and a solarium, in which I glimpsed him often reading in his rocking chair, intently focused, hand at his chin, fingers combing through his beard. But he was true to his word, and left on an early spring day with long blue shadows and patches of gray snow. He left his farewell letter atop a pile of gold coins. Soon after, a family of toads moved in, 5 children, 7 in all. They were the occupants when the turf war broke out, and I feared for their safety, with my garden being in the hotly disputed part of my yard. Luckily, the squirrels placed a protectorate over the garden, pledging to protect the toads and spiders and ladybugs from the chipmunks, which was upheld long enough for the treaty to be signed, wherein I included a clause threatening to erect a wire cage around the garden should aggression recommence. But while the toads were living there, I was charmed by a stone toad sculpture at the market, and so I gifted it to them and placed it in front of their house. When the children grew, they left, but they too left a letter of gratitude and farewell, which I saved as well. Still the sculpture stands, the only sculpture in a traditional garden. But once stood a magnificent garden, though with plants and sculptures, it was a sculpture garden. Hidden behind tall hedges, it was a little-known wonder, and something of myth and legend to those nearby. What was Licarium hiding behind those tall hedges? What was worth shutting the world away from? But secrets do not keep well when the truth is even better than the stories. Local children snuck in, and word spread like creeping vines. It was a sculpture garden, in maze-like courtyards and walkways interspersed with fountains that cascaded over murals and mosaics of blue tile that showed scenes of epic grandeur, of flowing jugs of rich wine, piles of gold, looming castles and pillowed palace throne rooms. Atop those fountains stood life-sized fawns, maidens perpetually spitting unicorns, and between the hedges were running naked children, skipping while stuck to the floor. Licarium, living alone, had quite the collection beyond this as well, and the neighborhood children that told of the life-sized dragons with pearl and sapphire eyes, whose wings were mid-beat, and whose red rock and rusted flame was truly scorching hot in the sun, whose scales were twinkling glass over limestone, were indeed correct that it was quite the collection. He had animals of many kinds, woodland, farm, and jungle. He had mushrooms inlaid with creek crystals, and nymphs to guard them. He had an army of clay soldiers in formed ranks, ready to march to war. He had muscle-bound golems with arms crossed, frowning diligently on guarding watch in each quarter and bailey. He had lovers at play and at rest, singers silently contorted in a high note. He had small towns and marketplaces, stone houses filled with stone moms and dads and babies. It was wholly untrue that they had once been humans who wandered into the garden. He had flowers in each and every stage of bloom, and in all colors, and rainbows of bent beaten metals, copper, steel, silver, and gold-stained bright hues. He had leaping fish tethered by their leaping splashes, and in his reflecting pools octopuses, sea serpents, and mermaids dressed in flowing mossy algae. He had a king's court in a feasting pantomime, with raised chalices that never lowered, and racing horses whose other shoes never dropped. Little surprise it is to us that Lacarium's mystery was a poorly kept secret. But perhaps in every unkept secret, every true story, every once great legend, there is a part that remains under the wraps of imagination. Because how could a legend be wholly true, when none are wholly untrue? After all, legends do not sprout up from the ground like pitmen during an earthquake. It was a joyous occasion each time a new sculpture came to the garden. They would arrive in a crate like a birthday present wrapped for Lacarium to open. For all his sculptures and statues, Lacarium himself was not a sculptor. But a particular sculptor did receive an invitation to Lacarium's garden. This was a very great, prolific sculptor who happened as well to be young and handsome. He took Lacarium's invitation and was permitted a tour around the grounds. Lacarium, though he lived alone, had a whole household hired to see to the sculptor's every whim. And oddly, the garden came to life when the sculptor took his tour. At his feet dozens of stone mice scurried by. The soldiers marched to orders as the fish splished and splashed, jumping from the fountains. The marketplace boomed, and an alligator chased the sculptor down a hedgerow and leapt into a mossy reflecting pool. The dragon fire from their lips turned hot, and their stone wings beat and crackled as the pieces rubbed together. As the tour drew to a close, they came upon a fountain, with a dancer's ewer raining a cascading corkscrew of water as she spun in an infinite pirouette. At once the sculptor knew what addition he would make to the garden, a dancing partner for the lovely fountain maid. So the sculptor made a statue of white marble to match the fountain dancer. He created him in his own image, and Lacarium said the enchantments to make it move. And there the statue of the sculptor took his place beside the dancer, and they spun as the crown jewel of the garden, full with thunderous steps of jeweled elephants, and the roars of rock lions, and the hum of a cold imitation of life. At night the torches went up to let Lacarium admire his estate with his newest addition. And between the bustle of the market, splashing of stone fish, braying of unicorns and rising flames of dragons, the water in the fountain was still. Both dancers were gone, all under the watchful eye of the statue guards and Lacarium himself. But as the lovers stole away, the sculptor, dipped in white paint and practiced at standing still, they came to find an obstacle. The sculptor could slip through the leaves of the hedge with only a few smeared marks where the leaves rubbed against him, but the white marble dancer could not pass the threshold and still speak, walk, or love the sculptor back. Lacarium found them there, and by their love was so persuaded to place a new enchantment over each and every statue on his land. As I said, once such a garden stood, magnificent statues still by daylight, but animated at the behest of the lord of the manor. And all at once they were set free, and wandered into Ethan to find their destinies. That's why on some farms you'll find a sheep that bears an iron fleece. In some jungles, some monkey shrieks echo through stone lips instead of skin. Some armies have sergeants with nerves of steel, who do not need armor to deflect their enemies' blows. But other soldiers of those statue battalions went other ways, became weavers and interior designers and carpenters. In Ethan there are, here and there and around, birds of porcelain and alabaster and ceramic. There are men and women and creatures of limestone, clay, and marble. They are in homes married, or in cities doing their jobs, or off in the wilds or on the high seas. There are all manner of things in Ethan, but in Lacarium's great garden there are only ornate fountains, all with still, calm water.